we're sitting at this kind of start of Q2. What do you think the rest of Q2 and Q3 looks like in terms of AI?
I think it's for us, we're at a kind of as a business, talking about putting my Dudley hat on. Um, we're at a point in kind of a process, a deliberate process, I guess. This is one of the things I was talked about. A lot of people ask, like, what are you doing? It's not about some widget that we're building. It's about our learning process, right? And for us, last Q4 of last year was like, okay, it's here. It's time to really try to start get serious about, learning about how we use AI, right? So there's a lot of talk about that in Q4, and Q1 was like, all right, we're going in trainings, broke into group sessions, a lot of just baseline education, on AI. Um, Breakout groups to start talking about, okay, let's show an examples of how you can um, solve a problem. And, you were a big part of that with helping us and, our groups. And through that process, we went 4 months in, 3, 4 months into that, then like, not to say the cream rises to the top, but your early adopters show themselves, the
Mm-hmm.
people who really cling to it, have a real interest in how, it kind of clicks with them. And we're at that point now where, we've got 3 or 4 of those early adopters identified, and looking for a couple of more. We're trying to get good representation in all of our departments. Um, Q2 and Q3 are about, all right, how do we take those people and put them in an environment where they can start actually really building and driving toward things that can solve problems that we can then push out to the organization, right? So the next few months for us are like, we've identified a couple of big things that we think are the first steps for us. What tools can we build? What workflows can we automate that make us better? And for us, it's a lot of quality control oriented things. And so that's establishing the skills. It's establishing, all the baseline reference material for like, what is a landman? What is an ownership report? How should it look? What is a run sheet? How should it look? How should it reason? What should the context be? So establishing that and then starting to build some tools. And then Q3 is about, okay, we've built these tools. Now does it work throughout the company? Right. And then you adjust those resources for an Eastern States project or a Permian job or whatever. And then hopefully by Q4, we've got those products developed, polished, beta tested, and then we start pushing them into like company wide use. And that's where the real work happens, is really rolling it out and putting it into your system so that you can have some meaningful effect,
Yeah.
meaningful results from the products that we build. And so if we go about that, our thought is like, we work in quarters at Dudley. Like all our initiatives are quarterly based, and so then it's a matter of like, okay, we've done these things. It's improved. What's the next thing? And then just roll it in that process. And in time, we get better and more efficient, and we get more adopters and more people who are capable of building things on their own. But a lot of organization, a lot of like continued pushing for those key people in our group, and we're hoping within 6 months we've actually developed some of the tools that we'll be able to use across the company.
Yeah.
So that's just where we are in our process, right? And
Yeah.
I think other companies are going to go through a similar process if they do it responsibly. Um, but that's where we are. And one thing I do know is we don't know as much as we need to know.
What's crazy is like this stuff moves so fast.
It does.
Like something could come out next week that's just like, oh, well, we have to change the entire strategy because,
It's already happening. It's
yeah,
just like,
yeah,
what do you do? I mean, you can sit there googly eyed and be like, what do I do? Or you can just say, you know what? No, let's laser focus on a thing
yeah,
and let's push to that. And through that process, we're going to learn. And then when we focus on the next thing, we'll have those learnings and we can get iteratively better.
yeah.
You got to have your end goals in mind. Like, this is the product, like this is the thing.
Well, and that's why, I say this all the time, but when AI starts executing for you, you're not hitting keystrokes as much. You're not copying and pasting like you are with conversational AI. When an agentic AI is doing stuff for you, It requires you have to start focusing on your judgment. That's going to be the most important thing, is that you still have to decide what gets worked on. You still have to decide what's good enough. Where are we going, right? And then you have to have the discipline of focus, because when all these things start popping up and you can go this direction and that direction, oh, I could do this, I could do that. Then you have all these like half-baked ideas that are not shipped and they're just sitting there. And you're sitting there like, well, I guess we just did a bunch of different things that didn't really go anywhere.
I got a lot of stuff at 70%.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
And we're pretty fortunate in that sense. You know, we've been programming, you know, our land system for the last 4 years. And that was some mistakes that we made early on. I was like, we got to do this and we need to do that and we got to fix this. And you end up with a lot of modules and functionality that's half baked. Mm-hmm. And then you just got a mess and like, where do I go from here? So we're able to take some of those learnings. Like, you know, it's easier to do things now, but you still have to be disciplined about, hey, finish what you start, and really, you know, drive to what you do and still learn, still expand your horizons and your abilities. But you can't just go chasing squirrels. You know, what are we going to do? What are we best at? What are we best suited to build, and focus on that.
Yep.
And then, in time you'll get better and better, and you can just expand on that. Start with a little snowball, make a snowman.
Exactly. And like, you have developers on staff, but like, you don't want your senior prospect manager or whatever it is becoming a developer and managing a software tool that you know what I mean? And that's only going to kill focus, right? Because then you're missing the forest for the trees, you know?
It will. I mean, you need them guiding the effort 100%. They need to be, this is the tool. This is why we need it. This is how it works. This is how it relates. And what AI has been able to do, and Claude Code we've been able to put those people on a 2-week sprint to say, okay, this is the thing. Let's mock up visually how this would work, how it relates, you know, and then you can build a product that you can then demo to the programming team, and to a certain extent, have it set up in a code base that's compatible with what you're using. But then say, okay, then hand that off to the team to say, all right, now build this so that it's protected, that it's secure, you know, and that it's not just going wild. It's not buggy, you know? And that's the way, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be how the marriage, and that's really the beauty of it actually is, for years, you kind of, and software is that way. It's like, well, you just got to use what you're given, and you can tell it's not built by landmen, right? And it's like, oh, well, this is the thing. And if you wanted something, well, you had to send a request, and it took months, or it never got built. And that's, I'm not poo-pooing on other people. That lives in our environment. You know, it's just like, there's that communication that's lost. But now somebody can sit down and build out a workflow and build a website essentially that replicates what they want. And they can hand that to the team and says, here's the picture, you know, paint it. So really cool in that sense. And it's exciting. There's so much changing. You can very much, you can get discouraged and almost feel like it's overwhelming, but you know, one bite at a time. And that's how the industry is going to evolve. And I think that's the disciplined way to go about it.